I play a character called Drexel. Spivot.
If you love good movies, then you would agree with me that True Romance is one of the greatest romantic movies ever made. At first, many people disagreed with this fact, but as years passed, they finally agreed. Here are 20 weird facts that you probably didn't know about the making of this great movie. Number 20, Tarantino made a lot of sacrifices. Behind every great movie, a mastermind always writes the script. In True Romance's case, that mastermind is Quentin Tarantino. Unlike other writers, Tarantino had to make tough decisions before the movie came to life. He reportedly sold his screenplay for $50,000. As of then, that amount was the bare minimum allowed under WGA guidelines. The weird thing about this is that Tarantino didn't start writing the script. The script was written by Roger Avey entitled Open Road. When Avery got stuck at page 50, he brought in Tarantino to give the script a try. Tarantino then continued writing the script by hand. He wrote 300 pages. That script included story elements used in True Romance, Pulp Fiction, and Natural Born Killers. True Romance's first act borrowed heavily from My Best Friend's Birthday, a comedy by Tarantino in 1987. True Romance was a success for Quentin Tarantino after his other movie, Reservoir Dogs. It was actually his first screenplay for a motion picture. Deep down within him, Tarantino wanted to direct True Romance, but later lost interest and sold the script. There was no reason stated as to why he did that. However, according to Tarantino's audio commentary on the DVD release, he was happy with how it turned out. Apart from changing the non-linear narrative he wrote to a more conventional linear structure, it was largely faithful to his original screenplay. Before Tony Scott was brought on board as the film director, William Lustig was brought on board, but Tarantino rejected him. According to him, he lacked faith in Lustig and thought Lustig could do what Jonathan Demme did by starting in low-budget B movies before ascending to the A-list. After he voiced his concerns, the producers dismissed Lustig as a director when he demanded that nearly all of the interior scenes in the screenplay be moved outdoors. What always leads me in terms of my movies is the characters. Go into the real world, cast these people in the real world, and find me role models for my writers. Then I reverse engineer. I don't change the script structure, but use my research. That's always been my mantra, and that's what gets me excited, because I get to educate and entertain myself in terms of worlds I could never normally touch, other than the fact that I'm a director. If you look at my body of work, there's always a dark side to my characters, Quentin Tarantino said of his writing style. They've always got a skeleton in the closet. They've always got a subtext. I like that. Whether it's Bruce Willis in Last Boy Scout or Denzel Washington in The Taking of Pelham 1 and 23, I think fear. And there are two ways of looking at fear. The most frightening thing I do is get up and shoot movies. Commercials, movies, every morning I'm bolt upright on 1 hour, 2 hours sleep before the alarm clock goes off. That's a good thing. That fear motivates me, and I enjoy that fear. I'm perverse in that way. I do other things. I've been rock climbing all my life. Whenever I finish a movie, I do multi-day ascents and hang it on a wall in Yosemite. That fear is tangible. That's black and white. I can make this hold or that hold. The other fear is intangible, abstract, and frightening, he concluded. Number 19. As good as True Romance was, Bob Dole wasn't a fan. Although the movie garnered many fans, not everybody liked it. Among them was Bob Dole. 2 years after True Romance was released, Senator Bob Dole, who once showed interest in the U.S. presidential seat, remarked that both True Romance and Natural Born Killers were movies that revel in mindless violence and loveless sex. He made this statement in a speech directed at film executives to put out more family-oriented films. Robert Joseph Dole was an American politician, attorney, and U.S. Army officer from Kansas who served as a member of the United States Senate from 1969 to 1996. Bob Dole was the Republican leader of the United States Senate during the final 11 years of his tenure, including 3 non-consecutive years as Majority Leader of the United States Senate. Before he served for 27 years in the Senate, Bob Dole served in the United States House of Representatives from 1961 to 1969. He was also the Republican presidential nominee in the 1969 election and the vice presidential nominee in the 1976 election. Because of his position in society, his statement about True Romance could soil the movie's name. Thankfully, it didn't. Number 18. Director Tony Scott had to make a choice. Even though Tarantino wanted to direct True Romance, he couldn't. Some speculators thought he couldn't because of his lack of skill. Although a few names were mentioned, Tarantino gave the two scripts to Tony Scott and made him pick one of the two. Tony Scott wanted to direct both films, but later chose to direct True Romance. Tarantino, on the other hand, was left with Reservoir Dogs. Tony Scott was the younger brother of film director Ridley Scott. The two brothers both graduated from the Royal College of Art in London. They were among a generation of successful British film directors because they made television commercials at first. They both received the BAFTA Award for Outstanding British Contribution to Cinema in 1995. Then, in 2010, they received the BAFTA Britannia Award for Worldwide Contribution to Filmed Entertainment. Tony Scott made the right choice directing True Romance. Although he didn't expect much from the movie later turned out to be a great success. Unfortunately, Tony Scott passed away on the 19th of August, 2012. On that very day, at around 12:30 p.m. PDT, Tony Scott reportedly jumped off the Vincent Thomas Bridge in the San Pedro Port District of Los Angeles. Tony Scott parked his car on the Vincent Thomas Bridge in Los Angeles and left behind two notes. One was in the vehicle with contact information, and another was found at his office, addressed to his family. Witnesses later recalled that he climbed the fence and jumped. One insisted he did not hesitate. Another remembered him pausing nervously briefly before letting go. He landed beside a passing tour boat, and his body was recovered from the water by the Los Angeles Port Police. 3 days later, Los Angeles County Coroner spokesman Ed Winters confirmed that the notes did not mention health problems. Their full contents were never disclosed by either the police or Scott's family. The director's demise stunned Hollywood. In a 2014 interview with Variety, his brother Ridley described it as inexplicable, though he revealed that Tony had endured a long private battle with cancer. Ridley insisted Tony had been in recovery, which made his suicide all the more difficult to understand. Nearly a decade later, The New Yorker reported that Tony had called Ridley, who was filming in France moments before he jumped. "I said, 'Have you decided about this film yet? Get going, let's get you into a movie,'" Ridley recalled, remembering his brother's uncharacteristically downbeat tone, but not realizing what he was about to do. In the days following, the Scott family announced the creation of a scholarship fund at the American Film Institute in his honor. The family asks that instead of flowers, donations be made to the fund to help encourage and engage future generations of filmmakers. Their statement read, "Scott was cremated, and his ashes were interred at Hollywood Forever Cemetery on August 24, 2012. His estate was left to the family trust. Tributes poured in from collaborators and admirers. Tom Cruise called him a creative visionary whose mark on film is immeasurable. Denzel Washington, who worked with Scott more than any other actor, remembered him as a great director, a genuine friend, adding, 'It is unfathomable to think that he is now gone.' UK Chairman Charles Sturridge praised Scott as a brilliant British director with an extraordinary ability to create energy on screen, both in action and in the creation of character." Number 17. How Drexel's costume was made. Gary Oldman, who played the violent pimp Drexel Spivey in True Romance, wasn't expecting that his role would later earn him a title. According to MSN Movies, he was described as one of cinema's most memorable villains. Just before he starred in True Romance, he had just concluded his role in Bram Stoker's Dracula the year before. Gary Oldman chose to reuse his wigmaker and costume designer from that film for his indelible character of Drexel Spivey in True Romance. In the movie, Drexel is seen wearing one of Oldman's fake eyes as Dracula. Another surprising fact is that Gary Oldman's 70-year-old mother made sure she was present every day of filming to help shape her son's performance. Years after the making of True Love, Oldman has called Drexel Spivey and Lee Harvey Oswald in JFK his two favorite characters of his career. Number 16. Patricia Arquette struggled on set. Patricia Arquette, who played the role of Alabama Whitman Worley, the prostitute Clarence slept with at the beginning before he later married her, struggled with a few things during filming. In a particular emotional scene, Arquette struggled to find the exact performance necessary to nail the scene. According to Tarantino, through the 2012 podcast mentioned previously, Arquette asked Tony Scott for the persuader, which meant asking the director to slap her until she got into the emotional headspace necessary for her performance. When Arquette was new to the industry, she had gone ahead to prove herself by receiving the most recognition for her role as Alabama Whitman, a free-spirited, kind-hearted prostitute in True Romance. In one major scene, Arquette's character engages in a brutal fight with James Gandolfini, ultimately emerging victorious after a fierce physical struggle. Her performance in the film drew widespread critical acclaim. Janet Maslin of the New York Times highlighted the unexpected tenderness she brought to the role, while Peter Travers praised her, noting that Arquette delivers sensationally. Number 15. The character. Clarence had a few other interests. Before the final casting, actors like Val Kilmer showed interest in a particular character. According to how it later played out, Val Kilmer wasn't one to give up easily. He went as far as making records of himself reading the part of Clarence and sent them to Tony Scott. Even after Tony Scott refused to cast him as Clarence, he still proved his resilience when he was cast for the role of Elvis Presley. Although forced to play that role, he still called Tony Scott late at night to sing Elvis Presley's songs. Christian Slater, who later played Clarence Worley in True Romance, proved he was worth the role. In his review of True Romance, Roger Ebert awarded the movie 3 stars out of 4 and said, "The energy and style of the film are exhilarating." According to him, Christian Slater has the kind of cocky recklessness the movie needs. Number 14. The reason Elvis Presley's song didn't make it into True Romance. Elvis Presley's songs were supposed to have been featured in True Romance. In fact, Tony Scott planned to use one of his songs during the opening scene, but Elvis Presley's estate denied them access. It is also why Val Kilmer's Elvis character is referred to as Mentor in the credits. Even if they were denied access to his songs, they could at least name Alabama and Clarence's son Elvis, played by Arquette's son, Enzo Rossi. Number 13. James Gandolfini was recommended for his role. The first actor who was chosen to play the role of Virgil was Sizemore. He was doing well, but got uncomfortable when he was asked to beat up Patricia Arquette in a scene. When he couldn't do it, he asked for the role of Cody Nicholson instead. That decision left a loophole in the cast list, so Tony Scott asked Sizemore who should play Virgil. Sizemore suggested James Gandolfini, an unknown actor he knew from the New York theater world. That was how James Gandolfini got into True Romance. Number 12. Brad Pitt did a lot of improvisations. Brad Pitt was another star who appeared in True Romance. Even if it was brief, he garnered much attention. He played the role of Floyd, a stoner, and he made the role a lively one. He was the comic relief in the film, which later earned him a Show West Award for Male Star of Tomorrow. After Brad Pitt appeared in Ridley Scott's Thelma and Louise in 1991, he went to Hollywood's top A list. The interesting thing about this fact is that Brad Pitt requested to play the role of Floyd, Michael Rappaport's stoner roommate in True Romance. Brad Pitt called and said, "Why don't you let me play the roommate?" The late director recalled 2008. I said, "Are you serious?" "Fucking yes," because he was in the bloom of stardom. Added James Gandolfini, "Everybody was young and nuts. Brad Pitt was around too. I don't think he was Brad Pitt then, but he was great. I just had to watch him and say, what a fucking flake." He improvised a lot. As if that wasn't enough, Brad Pitt made many improvisations on set. For example, Brad Pitt found the Rastafarian hat Floyd wears during the kitchen sequence on the ground at the Venice Beach boardwalk. For the iconic scene where the mafiosos visit Floyd, the music supervisor inserted a temp track for Soundgarden's Outshined. The song was such a hit in test screenings that a large portion of the budget went to purchasing rights for the song to be used in the final cut. Number 11. James Gandolfini proved that he was worth it. He did something absurd. James Gandolfini proved that his recommendation wasn't a waste and was worth it. Aside from Brad Pitt, he also got into his character. During his stay in a squalid hotel, James was without a phone and rarely used the shower. When he noticed that Christopher Walken refused earplugs for the scene where Dennis Hopper gets shot, James Gandolfini decided to do the same. Little did he know that his decision would affect his ear. He couldn't hear for 3 days. The iconic fight scene between Alabama and Virgil took 5 days to film. James Gandolfini also revealed that one of the primary inspirations for his character was an old friend who was a hitman. However, it failed at the box office. James Gandolfini's performance in True Romance received critical praise. Number 10. Bronson Pinchot and Michael Rappaport took risks on set. In addition to Brad Pitt, James Gandolfini, and Patricia Arquette, Bronson Pinchot and Michael Rappaport also got into character, although it wasn't easy for them. They both had to take risks on set. That particular roller coaster scene wasn't relatively easy for the actors. Bronson Pinchot admitted that he was terrified filming it. The roller coaster scene in the original script was supposed to take place at a zoo, but Tony Scott changed the setting to a park to inject the film with an adrenaline rush. In that particular scene, Clarence discusses a drug deal on a roller coaster with Elliot, Alabama, and Dick. Nobody on set knew Michael Rappaport was prone to extreme motion sickness while riding roller coasters. I had to do it twice with Christian and then got off and had vertigo and the whole thing, and Tony said, "Bronny, I'd like to do a neat close-up of you, so can you go again? I'd like to take Christian out of the seat, mount a camera there, and send you up." I don't know why, but I did it, and he made me do it thrice. In the end, I was crying and dry heaving. However, Rappaport's protests were ignored. After shooting those scenes, he only threw up after going on his first trip. As for his second trip, he was high on Quaaludes. Number 9, Kevin Corrigan almost could pass for a gangster. Another actor who got into character is Kevin Corrigan. He did so well that he was popularly called Mad Dog by gangster character actor Frank Adonis. According to Frank, Corrigan reminded him of the hitman Vincent Mad Dog Call from the 1920s and 30s. In True Romance, Kevin Corrigan's actual character name, Marvin, was never spoken or shown in the movie. Kevin Corrigan's appearance in True Romance is described as absolutely unconventional. His jet black hair is often at odds with itself. He walks lanky and uninterested in getting anywhere, while his voice, a lethargic monotone, sounds like someone who perpetually just woke up. All these were enough for Frank Adonis to label him a mad dog. Number 8, Tony Scott really put in his best. It is undisputed that Tony Scott was the right man to direct True Romance. He proved this severely on set, even as early as the first day of shooting. Even if Tony Scott chose Slater to play the role of Clarence, he didn't approve of some of his acts. Tony Scott gave Slater Taxi Driver to watch as his homework. Tarantino reportedly wanted Robert Carradine in mind for Clarence when he wrote the script. Tony Scott really gave True Romance his all. He even slapped Patricia Arquette on set to get her into character. However, he did that with her permission, and by the end of the shooting, she was asking for the persuader to be able to act in key scenes. In another scene with shooting, Tony Scott did a dangerous thing. As the gun meant to be used was being filled with blanks, it suddenly released flames from the side. To prove that the gun was safe to be used on set, Tony Scott had a crew member shoot him with the gun. After he was shot, Tony Scott started bleeding. He then reportedly acknowledged that an alternative approach was necessary. After that incident, actor Hopper wasn't alone in his insistence on gun safety. Gary Oldman also wore a metal cup, just in case. Number 7, a scene from True Romance was drawn from real life. Tarantino declared the popular Sicilian speech in True Romance among his proudest feats as a writer. According to Dennis Hopper, only 2 words in the exchange between him and Christopher Walken were improvised: eggplant and cantaloupe. The inspiration for that scene came from a real-life incident. He overheard a black man who lived in his house making sentimental statements. Tarantino reportedly remembered that dialogue and also included it in his script. Number 6. True Romance was initially a box office failure. Despite True Romance's massive success, the movie was initially a box office failure. Then unexpectedly it got positive reviews, and critics praised the dialogue, characters, and offbeat style. These reviews helped the film earn a cult following and have come to be considered one of Tony Scott's best films and one of the best American films of the 1990s. True Romance earned $4 million during its opening weekend. It ranked in 3rd place behind The Fugitive and Undercover Blues. It was then given a domestic release and earned over $12 million on a $12.5 million budget. Number 5. True Romance was cut for an R rating. Due to its wide theatrical release, the United States MPAA cut True Romance was for an R rating. Most of the confrontation between Alabama and Virgil was cut. The ending shootout scene was also cut out. The ending shootout scene was also edited. It was decided that Nicky Dimes would not be killed by Alabama, but by Toothpick Vic, one of the Mafia hitmen. This was the official 1993 rental VHS release edit. However, all DVD and Blu-ray releases are subsequently of the original unrated director's cut, but the 2022 4K release from Arrow has both cuts of the film. Number 4. The idea behind the movie's title. The title True Romance was inspired by the names of old romantic comic books, which also helped shape the foundation of the film's plot and tone. Quentin Tarantino, who originally wrote the screenplay, was fascinated by the pulpy, exaggerated emotions and heightened drama in these comics. Titles such as True Life Secrets, True Stories of Romance, Romance Tales, Untamed Love, and Strange Love reflected the same mix of passion, danger, and raw intensity he wanted to capture on screen. By borrowing from this tradition, the film's title not only nods to the comic book origins, but also plays with the irony of its story, where love and violence become inseparably linked. In this way, True Romance carries both a nostalgic homage to mid-20th century pulp culture and a bold declaration of the kind of wild, unconventional love story it sets out to tell. Number 3. True Romance almost birthed a real-life couple. Being a romantic movie with many steamy scenes, True Romance almost birthed an actual romantic relationship. You obviously do not need to guess the affected actors because it should be someone other than the two lead actors. After the release of True Romance, Christian Slater admitted to having been romantically involved with his co-star Patricia Arquette during filming, although it lasted for a very short time. According to him, the protracted nude love scene they had together was really special. I lost sight of the crew being around. It was the first time nothing on the outside really mattered, Slater revealed. They both later went on to have several unsuccessful relationships. In 2002, Slater married Ryan Haddon, the daughter of model Dale Haddon. Together they have 2 children. Sadly, they got divorced. Then, in 2013, he gave love another chance and married Brittany Lopez in Florida after 3 years of dating. They both have 2 children together. As for Patricia Arquette, she was in a relationship with Paul Rossi, a musician, when she was 20 years old. She had a son for him. After they separated, she married Nicolas Cage in 1995, but separated after 9 months. However, they both acted as a couple in public until Cage filed for divorce in 2000. Then Arquette tried again and got engaged to Thomas Jane in 2002. They have a daughter together and got married in 2006. After their separation, Patricia Arquette entered into another relationship with painter Eric White in 2014. As of January 25, Patricia Arquette said she had been single for almost 2 years. It looks like Arquette was the unlucky one. What if she and Slater actually gave love a chance? Would they have had rocky relationships? Number 2. No one was expecting the success that followed. No one expected the movie to succeed since True Romance failed at the box office. Unexpectedly, in 2017, Empire ranked True Romance the 83rd most excellent film of all time, writing, "Tony Scott's handling of Quentin Tarantino's script came off like the cinematic equivalent of cocaine-flavored bubblegum, a bright, flavorsome confection that had an intoxicatingly violent kick. It also drew some tremendous big names to its supporting cast." Then Oliver Littleton of IndieWire praised the Sicilian scene and called it one of the most beautiful tête-à-têtes in contemporary cinema, wonderfully written and made utterly iconic by the 2 virtuoso actors. Quentin Tarantino himself has named it as one of his proudest moments. I had heard that whole speech about the Sicilians long ago from a black guy living in my house. One day I was talking with a Sicilian friend and just started telling that speech. And I thought, wow, that is a great scene, I gotta remember that. As earlier revealed, the movie's villain also garnered acclaim. MSN Movies wrote, with just a few minutes of screen time, Gary Oldman crafts one of cinema's most memorable villains, the brutal, dreadlocked pimp Drexel Spivey. Even in a movie jammed with memorable cameos from screen luminaries, Oldman's scar-faced, dead-eyed, lethal gangster stood out. The character Spivey was also named as one of the top 5 coolest drug dealers in movie history. Jason Serafino of Complex Magazine wrote, "He's not in the film for a long time, but the few scant moments that Gary Oldman plays the psychopathic dealer Drexel Spivey make True Romance a classic." Oldman gave us a glimpse at one of cinema's most unfiltered sociopaths. Thomas Freeman, a Maxim journalist, also ranked Spivey as the most outstanding performance of Oldman's career. Robbers, a song by the English indie rock band The 1975 from their 2013 debut album, was inspired by the film. Vocalist Matthew Healy explained, "I got really obsessed with the idea behind Patricia Arquette's character in True Romance when I was about 18. That craving for the bad boy in that film is so sexualized." The 2013 debut album from English pop star Charlie XCX was named after the film. Also on Character Appraisal, Brad Pitt's stoner character in True Romance, Floyd, was named the inspiration for making the film Pineapple Express. Producer Judd Apatow thought it would be funny to make a movie where you follow that character out of his apartment and watch him get chased by bad guys. A few actors also benefited from True Romance. Before James Gandolfini landed his role of Tony Soprano on The Sopranos, he was invited to audition after casting director Susan Fitzgerald saw a short clip of his performance in True Romance. James Gandolfini immediately received the role ahead of several other actors, including Steven Van Zandt and Michael Rispoli. Lastly, a sample from the film is used in the trance song Solar Coaster by Solarstone. The sample includes the line spoken by Alabama. Those three words went through my mind endlessly, repeating themselves like a broken record. You're so cool, you're so cool, you're so cool. Number 1. The ending of True Romance was different from the one in the script. One fascinating fact about this movie that further proves that Tony Scott was the right man for the job is that the movie's ending was different from what Tarantino wrote in his script, all thanks to Tony Scott. Quentin wanted Clarence to die at the end, but Scott decided that the movie deserved a happier ending. Another difference between Tarantino's script and Scott's interpretation was presenting the movie linearly. Tarantino wrote True Romance as a non-linear adventure, similar to the style of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. At first, Tarantino wasn't comfortable with the change and opposed director Tony Scott's decision to change the ending. But Tony Scott maintained that it was of his own volition, not the studio's, saying, "I just fell in love with these two characters and didn't want to see them die." Tarantino was concerned that Scott was changing to appeal to commercial attitudes about filmmaking, to appease studio heads, and to appease his artistic vision. However, he explained to Maxim that Scott convinced me 100% that he wasn't doing it for commercial reasons. Tony Scott further explained to Tarantino that he viewed True Romance as a fairy tale more than anything else. According to its title, it was supposed to be a romantic movie. Scott simply fell in love with the characters, and he stated in Maxim that he did not want to see them die after falling in love with them. So Scott did not spare Clarence to appease anyone but himself and the characters. To Tarantino's credit, while he insists that his own version of this film would definitely keep the original ending, he later understood why Scott wanted to make the change. After Tarantino saw the completed film, he realized that Tony Scott's happy ending was more appropriate to the movie as Scott directed it. True Romance became a cultural landmark because of Quentin Tarantino's screenplay, which preceded Pulp Fiction, even though the graphic violence deterred some critics. True Romance is a 1993 American romantic crime film directed by the late Tony Scott and written by Quentin Tarantino. Rotten Tomatoes gives the movie an approval rating of 93% based on 61 reviews, with an average rating of 7.6 out of 10. The critics' consensus on its website reads, "Fueled by Quentin Tarantino's savvy screenplay and a gallery of oddball performances, Tony Scott's True Romance is a funny and violent action jaunt in the best sense." According to Metacritic, the film scores 59 out of 100 based on 19 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average B- grade on an A+2F scale. The movie was called one of the most dynamic action films of the 1990s by Phil Villarreal of the Arizona Daily Star. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave it 3 stars, stating that it's Tarantino's gutter poetry that detonates True Romance. This movie is dynamite. Another positive review was given to the film by Roger Ebert, who remarked that the energy and style of the movie are exhilarating, and that the supporting cast is superb. A roll call of actors at home in these violent waters. Christopher Walken, Dennis Hopper, and Brad Pitt, for example. True Romance may be celebrated today as a cult classic, but it wasn't immune to criticism upon its release. Some reviewers felt that the film's romance and ultraviolence pushed boundaries a little too far. For instance, The Washington Post's Richard Harrington acknowledged that the movie was stylistically visceral, but dismissed it as aesthetically corrupt, suggesting that its flashy energy came at the cost of real substance. Similarly, Janet Maslin of the New York Times described it as a vibrant, grisly, gleefully amoral road movie directed by Tony Scott and dominated by the machismo of Quentin Tarantino, warning that it was sure to offend a good-sized segment of the movie-going population. These early critiques reflected some mainstream critics' discomfort with the film's unapologetic blend of love story, dark humor, and shocking violence. Ironically, it is precisely that combination of tenderness and brutality that would later secure True Romance a lasting place in film history, as audiences came to embrace its boldness in ways many critics initially could not. Which of these facts shocked you the most? Who among the actors really outdid their roles in the movie? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting content.